Dinosaur games have been disappointing in the past several years, and there have only been a few that are actually good. I'm surprised my dream dinosaur game doesn't even exist yet. Or does it? Back in 2013, when I was younger, I always wanted a dinosaur game ever since I loved gaming and dinosaurs. When I actually played a ton of dinosaur games, I was really disappointed because they didn't have the things I wanted and the games themselves had many problems. At some point, I tried to get into game development myself so I can make the game, but I gave up because of how complicated game development is. So I waited and waited for other game devs to make it come true. But 9 years have gone by with no sign of it, and the dinosaur games that released in that time only kept disappointing me and leaving me to wonder, will my desired dinosaur game ever exist? Earlier this year, I was thinking maybe it does exist now, and I just haven't come across it yet. So I went on a quest to find the game of my dreams. Here are the main things I want for my dream dinosaur game. 1. Action combat. 2. RPG elements. 3. A full open world. And 4. A fantasy and or colorful art style. Basically, I want a game like Skyrim, but with a dynamic action combat system, but with dinosaurs. Hopefully, I would find a game with the things listed, but I had my doubts. The first few games I looked at were The Isle, Path of Titans, and Beasts of Bermuda. They all played similarly to an extent, but were any of them my dream game? No. In fact, none of them clicked. The combat on all of them didn't have any form of combos to pull off and had no action. That, and I'm not the biggest fan of realistic simulators. Not to mention, the open worlds were practically empty with almost nothing to interact with. The next game was Battle of Giants Dinosaur Strike. I actually enjoyed this game because of its art style and combat, even if it was mechanically basic. But it didn't check off what I wanted because it's primarily a fighting game and not open world. That and some of the dinosaurs had incorrect names and spelling, not to mention there was one dinosaur that was unplayable. I didn't care for Ark since it had a lot of flaws. Primal Carnage wasn't even close to my dream game. I easily get bored of Park Builder, so the Jurassic Evolution games were out of the picture, and Lego Jurassic World had more playable characters than dinosaurs. After that, I was going through a whole list of dinosaur games with no sign of what I'm looking for. There were only a handful of games to check out, and I was starting to lose hope. The next game is actually an MMO, Dino Storm. I liked the concept, but again, the game didn't check the boxes, primarily because, like with most MMOs, it had standstill auto combat with cooldown based attacks. That and the dino variety was very small with only a few you could access. Not exactly great for a live service dinosaur game. This next game was one my older brother found a few months back that I apparently missed as a child. Dice, a robot dinosaur game with hack-and-slash combat that was released on the PS2 back in 2005. I had a fairly good time playing it, but it had some issues. The combat, while good, was missing mechanics like iframes and the ability to counter or parry. Not to mention, some missions were really annoying and I didn't enjoy the racing sections since they were imbalanced and served no purpose. At some point, a friend of mine shared something with me that I found interesting, but there was a pretty big problem, which I'll mention in a bit. He shared a dinosaur game that at the time recently finished its Kickstarter campaign. It was a dinosaur taming game called Pangea Beyond Extinction. I read the description of the Kickstarter page and saw that it was going to be an RPG with unique mechanics. That checked the box. The next thing is that it's taking place in an open world fantasy universe, which also checked out. It's focusing on quality and innovation, which was really good since most dinosaur games haven't focused on those things. Really looking good so far. Then I see the info about the combat system, which at first looked promising. A hybrid combat system that allows various playstyles. I was skeptical about this since a good combat system is the one thing I want dinosaur games to have. One in particular that involved combos you could pull off like with some hack and slash games. But unfortunately, this is where the problems come in. I decided to join the Pangea Discord and read more about the combat for the game. It's going to have what they considered similar combat to games like World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, and Star Wars The Old Republic, which is that standstill auto combat with cooldown based attacks. Now, let me clarify by saying the game won't be bad because of this, and the information wasn't misleading. If they want the combat to be like that, it's fine. The game will be an MMO, so I should have seen this coming, but I've been waiting 9 years of my life for a dinosaur game with RPG mechanics, an open world with lots of things to do, and a good action-based combat system. When you see a game that is nailing everything you've been asking for except for the one thing that really matters to you, in this case combat, it can be crushing. As a result of learning about this, I left the Pangea Discord server so no one would see see how disappointed I was. I spent a few days pondering a lot and was questioning my desire for my dream game. Was it too much to ask? Will I have to force myself to like MMO combat? Will I have to give up my desire for such a game and convince myself that Pangea is my dream game? I really tried to convince myself of this and it never worked. So what was I left to do? Make the game myself? Frankly, I'm not sure myself yet, as I've heard many horror stories of game devs who failed. Not to mention, game development is really hard and time-consuming. So unless some time passes by and there are still no signs of a dinosaur game with the things I wish for, I would prefer not being a game dev. But for now, I'll keep making videos about this topic until the game I want gets announced, or I eventually give in and spend the next decade or so learning game development. I guess we'll see.